The first maneuvers of the battle began. Arjuna took up the Gandiva and said to Krishna, "O infallible one, please draw my chariot between the two armies so that I may see the enemy and how they are positioned. Go forward, O Lord, so I can see who is desirous of fighting with us today. Let us see those fools who wish to please the evil-minded son of Dhritarashtra." Krishna drove the horses forward and the fine chariot moved into the center of the field. Krishna smiled, "Just behold, O Arjuna, all the Kurus assembled here." Arjuna looked across the field. Krishna could understand Arjuna's mind. The long-awaiting time for war had arrived. A terrible, fratricidal war. There was now no turning back. Suddenly seeing the horror of it before him, Arjuna gazed at his relatives and friends arrayed across from him, men who were like fathers, brothers, sons and grandsons, as well as teachers, uncles, friends, in-laws, and well-wishers. Arjuna was overwhelmed with compassion. How could he possibly have looked forward to killing his own kinsmen and friends? He felt weak and addressed Krishna in a trembling voice, "My dear Lord, seeing my friends and relatives before me in a fighting spirit, I feel my limbs quivering and my mouth drying up." Arjuna's bow slipped from his hand and his body shook. His skin was burning and he felt his hair standing on end. "O Kesava, I do not think that I can carry on in this fight. I am forgetting myself and my mind is reeling. It seems to me that only evil and misfortune will result from this battle. How can any good come from killing one's own relatives? What value is victory if all our friends and loved ones are killed?" Arjuna dropped to his knees. There was no question of fighting. He had been different when he faced the Kauravas on Virata's field. At that time, he had no intention of killing them. He had only wanted to teach them a lesson. This time, however, either the Pandavas or the Kauravas would not be returning home. Tears streamed from his eyes as he revealed his mind to Krishna. "O Govinda, I have no desire for a kingdom bereft of my kinsfolk. When I see my teacher's father's sons and so on, many other near and dear ones, standing before me, my thirst for the fight completely deserts me. Even though they may be desiring my death, I cannot possibly think of killing them. O Janardana, Krishna, I would not slay them even in exchange for the three worlds, let alone this earth. I can see no happiness arising from this battle." Period. Sweat covered Arjuna's brow. His breath came in heavy sighs. The sight of old and respected personalities such as Bhismadev, Dronacharya, Salya, and Bahalika, all of whom he loved dearly, filled him with grief. The many young princes, sons of the Kauravas and their allies, were all like his own sons, and he felt compassion for them too. Even Dhritarashtra's sons were pitiable because they were so foolish. How could there be any virtue in killing them? Arjuna implored Krishna, "In my opinion, we will be overcome by sin if we slay such aggressors. Our proper duty is surely to forgive them, even if they have lost sight of virtue due to greed. We ourselves should not forget religious principles in the same way. If we kill the learned family elders, the traditional rituals will be forgotten, and they have essential for religious life. Without tradition, the whole of society will gradually become godless. By slaying the men, we will leave the women unprotected. They will then be prey to sinful men, and unwanted children will be born. Who will train these children, O Kesava? I will be responsible for all these social anomalies and will be worthy of a permanent residence in hell." Remembering his moral training, Arjuna based his arguments on Vedic statements. It seemed to him that killing his relatives was clearly immoral, particularly killing his elders, who were responsible for maintaining the religious traditions in his dynasty. Surely they should never be killed, especially for the duplicitous cause of winning wealth and kingdoms. Arjuna wept, I would rather the Kauravas kill me, unarmed and unresisting, than raise my weapons against them for the sake of my own happiness. He threw down his weapons and slumped in his chariot. Krishna was still smiling mildly as he looked at his grief-stricken friend. This was an uncharacteristic display of timidity from such a fearsome warrior. He replied to Arjuna firmly, how have these impurities come upon you at such a critical time? O Arjuna, this is not at all befitting a man who understands life's true values. It leads not to higher planets, but to degradation in infamy. O son of Kunti, do not yield to such importance. It is quite unbecoming. Give up this petty weakness of heart and arise, O chastiser of enemies. Arjuna looked with surprise at Krishna. What could he mean? He had simply dismissed all his arguments. Krishna had never given improper or disastrous advice to any time. At any time, he was the personification of all religious principles. Arjuna was perplexed. Why had Krishna disregarded the religious considerations he had raised? Of course, for a Kshatriya, it was always religious to fight and check miscreants, but these were not ordinary wrongdoers. Bhismadev, Dronacharya, Kripacharya, and so many others were highly respected men who carefully followed their religious duties. Still shaking, Arjuna asked, my dear Krishna, although it is right to kill sinful enemies, how can I fire arrows at men who are worthy of my worship? I would rather become a beggar than win this world at the cost of their lives. Even if they are afflicted with greed, they are still my superiors. What religious principle sanctions slaying them? If we win the war, then all our ill-gotten gains will be tainted with their blood. It seems to me that winning will be no better than losing. Victory is in any event uncertain. But in this case, it is not even desirable. How could I live after causing my relatives' death? Yet they are standing before me with upraised weapons. Arjuna could see no way out of his situation. The Kauravas were clearly intent on killing him in his army. Still he had no heart for the fight. Nor did it seem religious. At the same time, his religious arguments had no effect on Krishna. What was his duty now? There was only one person who could help him. He looked up at Krishna, who sat peacefully with the reins in his beloved hands. It was by Krishna's help that Arjuna and his brothers had survived so many difficulties. He was without doubt the wisest person. He would know what to do. Desiring to surrender himself to whatever Krishna advised, Arjuna said, O Krishna, I am confused about my duty and have lost all composure due to weakness of heart. Surely I am being consumed by miserly and selfish considerations, but I am not able to overcome them. In this condition, I ask you, please tell me what is best for me. Now I am your disciple and a soul surrendered unto you. Please instruct me. I can see no means to drive away this grief. Even winning a prosperous kingdom equal to that of the gods or demigods will not assuage my sorrow. O Govinda, I will not fight. Arjuna fell silent. Now it was up to Krishna to convince him. On the other side of the field, Bhismadev looked with interest at Arjuna's solitary chariot in the middle of the two armies. Why was Arjuna not in position? He seemed to have dropped down in his chariot. Something was going on between him and Krishna. Bhismadev raised his hand to hold back his forces. Was Krishna considering a final peace effort? Even on the battlefield, surely not. The conches had already been blown to signal the beginning of the fight. Whatever Krishna was doing, Bhismadev wanted to respect it. Bhismadev decided to wait until Arjuna's chariot moved off again before giving the order to charge. Yudhishthira was also holding his forces in check, so there was no need for immediate action. Krishna now smiled more broadly. He was pleased that Arjuna, his dear friend, was ready to accept him as teacher and guide. Holding up his hand in blessing, he said, "Although you are speaking learned words from the scriptures, you are still mourning for something unworthy of grief. A wise man laments neither for the living nor for the dead. Both you, I, and all these assembled Kshatriyas have always existed and will always exist. We are eternal souls passing from body to body. Even in this life, we see how the body changes, even though we remain the same person. In the same way, when death comes, we are given a new body. A self-controlled person is not bewildered by such a change. Matra spassastu kaunteya sitosna sukha dukhada agama paino anityastam stitiksva bharata. Kneeling at Krishna's feet, Arjuna felt immediate relief. As usual, Krishna had gone straight to the heart of matter. Arjuna listened attentively as Krishna continued, "O son of Kunti, happiness and distress come and go constantly like winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception, O alone. O son of Bharata, one should tolerate them without being disturbed. A person capable of such tolerance is eligible for liberation from the misery." The great seers who know the truth have concluded from a careful analysis that the soul and spiritual reality are unchanging, and that the temporary material body is ultimately without any basis in truth. The soul pervades the body and is indestructible. No one can destroy this immeasurable and eternal soul. Najayate miryate va kadachin nayam bhuttava bhavita na bhuyo ajo saswato ayam punano na hanate hanemane sarire. But the body is sure to come to an end. Therefore, fight without any compunction for your relatives' bodies, O Arjuna. Arjuna understood well enough what Krishna was saying. The soul was surely eternal. But was that a good argument to use? He was about to kill. Death and subsequent rebirth were painful experiences for the soul. Out of love for Arjuna and understanding his doubts, Krishna said, "Neither he who thinks the living entity, the slayer, nor he who thinks it slain is in knowledge. For the self slays, nor is slain. For this soul there is neither birth nor death at any time. He is never created, unborn, and ever existing. He is not slain when the body is slain. Knowing this, how can you ever be the cause of anyone's death? The soul is eternal, full of knowledge and full of bliss. Body is only the dead matter. Indeed, the body's death allows the soul to receive a new body. Just as a person puts new garments after discarding the old one, so the soul changes the body. Arjuna understood that Krishna was reassuring him that his beloved relatives would not be the losers. By killing their bodies, Arjuna would free them from the pain and suffering brought on by their present karma, and they would then be given a new start in a better body, probably in the higher planets. But Arjuna worried about the celestial weapons he would use, fearing they might somehow hurt even the soul. Krishna answered Arjuna's doubt was that some weapons which was being given from the heavenly planets might hurt the soul. But the soul is inkillable. Krishna answered that doubt. There is no weapon, be it fire, wind, or water, that can damage or cut the soul, spirit soul. The soul is unchanging. and impervious to all material effects, the soul is described by the Vedas as invisible, inconceivable, and immutable. The body is only the outward dress of the indestructible soul. Arjuna remained silent, even knowing Bhismadev and Dronacharya to be eternal souls. He still grieved at the prospect of their death. Krishna had already instructed him that such distresses were unavoidable. He had to be tolerated, but it's not be so easy. Krishna smiled affectionately at his friend. Even if you believe the self to be the same as the body, you still have no reason to lament. O mighty armed hero, the body is matter and material objects are always being created and destroyed. What wise man laments for the inevitable changes to matter which are wrought by time? Whatever you believe, the effects of time cannot be checked. Death follows birth, and birth follows death in due course. Simply perform your duty without lamentation, for you cannot change the course of time, which is ultimately the cause of everyone's death. Arjuna reflected on Krishna's words. It was difficult to comprehend the soul's existence. Ascharya vat tataiva, that is, was underlying and indestructible and had been made clear, but its actual nature remained a mystery. Without pausing, Krishna concluded his instructions about the soul. Those who know the soul consider him amazing. He is described in even the Vedas as amazing. Even persons who have heard all the descriptions of the soul, the spirit soul, still fail to understand him at all. Nevertheless, O descendant of Bharata, he cannot be slain at any time. Therefore, give up your useless grief for your relatives. Krishna changed tack and began to address Arjuna's fear that he would be tainted by sin if he killed his elders. You are a Kshatriya, Arjuna, and it is thus your foremost duty to fight according to religious principles. You should not hesitate. Rather, you should embrace this opportunity, for it opens the way to heaven for you. If you do not fight, you will incur sin for neglecting your duty. Thus, you will lose your good reputation, you will become infamous, and for a respectable person, dishonor is worse than death. No one will think you desisted from fighting out of compassion. They will think you fled in fear and will thus lose respect for you. What could be more painful than that? Hearing his commitment to his warrior duties challenged, Arjuna shifted uncomfortably. The thought that he might be acting sinfully was painful, and the loss of his good reputation would be intolerable. Krishna continued, O Partha, in this battle there are two possibilities. You will either be killed and thus attain heaven, or you will defeat your enemies and win the earth. Therefore, means the kingdom. Therefore, fight with determination, Arjuna. This too is my desire, O Partha. Fight because it is your duty to fight as a Kshatriya, without thought for happiness or distress, loss or gain, victory or defeat. In this way, you will never incur sin. In this way, you will never incur sin. Tasmat sarvesu kalesu mam anusmara yuddha cha mai arpito manobuddhi mama besasya samsaya. Arjuna is complaining Krishna that you ask me to meditate and do devotion while simultaneously fighting with my family members. What shall I do? Krishna says, Tasmat sarvesu kalesu mamanasumara yuddhacha mayarpito mano buddhi mam avashasya samsaya. Fight with your enemies and think of me. So in this way, you will never incur sin. In this way, you will never incur sin. You will not be implicated into sinful karma. Arjuna felt his heart opening as he observed in Krishna's instructions. Krishna had countered his fears that he would suffer and become sinful fighting. Actually, it would be sinful not to fight. I have told you some existential truths about the soul, O son of Kunti. The descriptions of the soul explanation to you was that the soul never dies, na jayate miryate va kadachinnayam bhuto abhavata. That the soul is unborn, unchanging, ill-killable, O son of Kunti. Listen now as I speak about waking without desire for the results. Thus, without entangling yourself in karmic reactions, this is the path to liberation. Once you are on this path, you will not fall back again into the abyss of material existence. Those on this path only desire to serve the Supreme and are resolute in performing their religious duties. Those who seek worldly happiness, however, are constantly overwhelmed by diverse temptations. Ekale Kuru Ishwara, only unintelligent men are attracted to those sections of the Vedas that speak about material happiness, desiring sensual pleasures, opulence, and power. They think there is nothing more to life. They become bewildered by such desires and cannot fix their minds upon yoga practice. Do not let yourself be attracted by anything in this world. O Partha, be free from the dualities of happiness and distress. Established in the self, give up your anxiety for material gain and safety. Arjuna could understand that his earlier arguments were aimed only at material happiness. Although he had argued on the strength of Vedic morality, it was becoming clear that he had not fully understood that Vedas and their ultimate aim, there were higher principles and truths. Krishna continued to explain them. Period.